So, hello all. I am Sam Kay, and I'll be leading the panel today on serialization, moving forward, finding new opportunities, and also talking about the sort of the structure. So you'll see on the slide, it says facilitated by Scott Lawson. Unfortunately, Scott Lawson, my colleague, was unable to make it today. We're also missing Angus from GSK. So my apologies that they both couldn't make it today. However, I do have with me today 4 very esteemed colleagues who will be helping me on the panel today. If I can give them each about 30 seconds to introduce each other. Mark, if you go first.
Yes, yeah. Hi, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Davison from rfXcel. If you want to know about rfXcel, come and see us. We're just in the exhibition area there. I won't give you too much sales pitch. I've been in the traceability area for 12 years now, seen it man and boy, and I think we're coming to the troublesome teenage years, which hopefully we'll get onto and give you some fun on games.
Well, good morning, my name is Jerome Bertin, I'm the General Manager of SecurMed UK. We are the UK Medicines Verification Organisation, setting up a national medicines verification system to enable the falsified medicines directive to be implemented in the UK and enable all the serialised packs to actually be used in anger. So that's what our role is.
Hello, I'm Peter Bryant. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of FarmaTrust. We're a provider of services into the pharmaceutical industry, and we have developed a blockchain-based solution to allow products serialized in order to comply with FMD to be traced through the supply chain.
I'm Ettore Cucchetti. I'm the CEO of SCG Inspection, part of a technology provider for Pharma. It's an Indian-owned company, but we're a multinational. We operate around the world. I'm personally coming from regulated market out of aerospace and automotive before landing into pharma. So there's a lot of similarities and problems there.
Absolutely. So, and I'm Sam Kay from PwC. I am PwC's regulatory expert, and I have a huge interest in FMD. I really do feel like it's a fast-moving field with great opportunity, but also great challenges. So I'm going to now hand it over to Jerome. So let me give you a bit of structure as well. So how it's going to work is I'm going to get each panelist to have a small presentation, should we say, conversation on their field of interest within serialization. We will hold the questions until the end. So we're going from Jerome to Peter to Ettore to Mark, and then after Mark, we'll open the discussion to the floor, and we'll have questions. Okay. So Jerome, if you can start.
I'll start. Okay. FMD, serialization, implementation of serialization. The date is the 9th of February. Are you ready for the 9th of February? Is everyone ready for the 9th of February? Is that the date we should all be aiming for? I don't think 9th of February is the date we should all be aiming for, because the 9th of February is just start, it's not the end. The legislation was published in 2016, 9th of February 2016, they gave 3 years to the European Commission for implementation. That 3 years is up on the 9th of February. But in terms of the change that we're going to make in the UK, is actually the start. At the moment, just 31st of October, we in the UK, we announced that our national system, the UK National Medicines Verification System, is open for business. It's open for the manufacturers and marketing authorisation holders to load their serialised pack data into that system. And as of Friday evening, we had just over 1.5 million packs in our system. We're expecting that to go rapidly over the coming weeks in readiness for the go-live. Similarly, we need to make sure that all the people who are going to be verifying, dispensing, decommissioning packs in the supply chain, they all need to start getting ready too. That's going to take quite a long time for that to happen. Initially, we have in the UK, we anticipate somewhere between 25,000 to 35,000 end user, what we call end user locations, to get registered, to get connected and get started up. In actual fact, this is a huge change. This is a huge change in working practices for a lot of those organisations. Serialisation and actually the implementation of serialisation through the Falsified Medicines Directive and the respective national systems, the actual systems, what the systems do is actually quite simple. What the people at the coalface need to do, the people who are out there on the wards, in the GP surgeons, primarily in community pharmacies, That's where the majority of the change is going to occur. And a lot of the change that's going to occur is going to be initially in how do you change over from what we have now. At the moment we have 1D barcoded packs, and you have 10 packs, and you scan the pack, all those packs, so you can scan 10 packs one time and one pack 10 times, because every pack, these packs are duplicated. When you're dealing with serialized packs, you're dealing with unique packs. Each pack is unique. There is also, because of the changeover, and because of other markets performing serialization, India is a good example. There's a lot of packs in the supply chain, particularly in the supply chain in pharmacies, in GP surgeries and in hospitals, that are already marked up and look like serialized packs. And because of the nature of the way that the UK supply chain works in the UK, there's a lot of general supply list medicines that are also marked up like in the same way as prescription-only medicines. So you go into your local Tesco's, and I go into my local Tesco's on a regular basis. On a regular basis, you can actually see packs that look like those. So if you're a pharmacist, or you're a wholesaler, or you're not actually the chief pharmacist, you're the pharmacy technician, or the wholesaling technician, and you're having to pick packs and verify them, which ones do you know are going to be the packs that you should be checking out to make sure they're authentic, and which ones are the ones that are pre-FMD? So this is going to be the big change. One of the big changes we're going to get over the next 2 years, as we start to ramp everyone up, is this changeover from non-serialized to serialized packs. And it's probably going to take, in the UK, it's probably going to take, in total, probably 4 to 5 years before the number of serialized packs, the full penetration and the full changeover from non-serialized to serialized packs. Now, I'm assuming, and given this conversation here, that Brexit, we're going to get a Brexit deal, and we are going to continue as part of the EU FMD implementation. I do know that the MHRA has issued a public consultation on a no-deal Brexit that says in the event of the no-deal Brexit, they would seek to withdraw the legislation. And what I'm going to talk today is about us going ahead and being part of the European implementation and continuing to be part of that through the Brexit transition period and beyond. Because that's all we as SecurMed UK, that's all we can plan for at the moment. But what we do see is this big change occurring. This big change, there's going to be a lot of issues, there's going to be a lot of thorny issues. What's going to happen when people start scanning these packs and they scan the right packs, great. Bing, bing, we get a nice green light and they can dispense those packs to patients. It's going to be when those packs get dispensed and they're either not packs, not the right packs, or the data's not there, because we know that unfortunately some manufacturers are not going to load the data correctly, or they're not going to load the data at all, then that's going to start raising exceptions. And what we don't need is a significant blockage in the supply chain of lots of medicines having to be put aside while an investigation is carried out. Because one, that'll have an impact, obviously, on the pharmacies, hospitals, etc., ultimately have an impact on patients, but it'll also have an impact on the manufacturers and marketing authorization holders who are going to need to investigate those and work with the regulators. The regulators, in terms of MHRA, they are also going to have significant overload if there's a huge number of exceptions raised due to the number of packs that are scanned, or maybe either incorrectly or through technical or procedural errors. So this is an area that there's a lot of work going on, not only at a national level in the UK, across different industry associations, across different industry bodies, but also at a European level to say, how can we make this work, but how can we make this work in a common manner? Because if you're familiar with the manufacturing supply chain, manufacturers work all over the world. I worked a couple of years ago with GlaxoSmithKline, just before I started this role. They have their supply chain works globally across the world. So all manufacturers need to understand how to manage this in a common way. So there's a huge change, not only at the end, what we call the end users, the pharmacies, the hospitals and the wholesalers, but also at the manufacturers and also within the regulators who are going to be verifying. So that's part of the change. The other part of the change is, and Brexit is not going to help this with Brexit stockpiling, is it's going to take time. It's going to take time for manufacturers, and I was looking this morning at the EMVO, the European organisation, about the number of manufacturers actually onboarded to the European EMVS production system. So just over 300 at the moment out of 1,200 registered. I think there's 2,500 marketing authorisation holders across Europe. So it's going to take a long time, and a lot of the big players are already registered and signed up. But it's going to take a long time for that volume of serialised packs to appear in the, firstly to get issued in the supply chain, and then to actually make their way through the supply chain to the locations where they're going to be verified and decommissioned. So that's part of the change as well. So the 9th of February is really just the start of a change. So, and that change is going to occur for the next 2 to 3 years. And then as the value of FMD is realised, and the value of what we're doing comes to fruition, then we'll start to see much more of the benefits of FMD coming through. I was at another session, a panel discussion a couple of weeks ago, with some pharmacists and some people from the wholesale. And for pharmacists in particular see FMD, they saw FMD as a benefit, not a challenge. They saw FMD as enabling them to manage their stock better, enabling them to manage expiry dates better, enabling them to understand when recalls occur. That's part of the way the system works. So there are a significant number of benefits around the implementation of FMD in the UK. I don't think we've necessarily told the story about the value that FMD is going to be delivered. We also all recognise what the costs are going to be. I think that value story is what needs to be told. So that's my little piece. Perhaps not 10 minutes. Over to the next person. So.
Jerome's already touched on the fact that FMD touches all points of this colossal industry. Can I quickly understand from the audience what parts of the industry you participate in? For example, do we have any representatives from wholesale distributors in the audience? 0. Okay. Anybody who would be a decommissioner, so a pharmacist or a hospital? So everybody's MAH. Yeah.
That's the point.
Okay.
That's
Which I think that maybe starts to highlight. Maybe it's the wrong conference for this conversation to think about a proposition that goes across all parties. However, I personally see that FMD has got some great values, some opportunities that can be derived once we start to take this little 2D data matrix and turn it into a digital artifact, a digital passport that then allows you to track that through every aspect of the supply chain. Jerome mentioned a couple of times cultural changes, and there's going to be some necessary cultural changes. Information sharing, data sharing, for example. Where do people sit on that? Because traditionally everyone works in their data vaults or data silos, and information won't pass from an MAH to a wholesale distributor, won't pass from a wholesale distributor down to a pharmacist. Now, are there not aspects of information that could be reasonably shared between those people, which isn't commercially sensitive, but would allow the industry to behave more cost effectively and more efficiently? And I think that using the likes of FMD, and once you start to capture the data that is presented from those packs, there's a significant opportunity, and people need to lift their eyes up from the CFO signing off checks which are all against the cost center called compliance, and start to consider the opportunities that present themselves in terms of improved inventory management, improved returns, improved, for example, the Ministry of Health could start to forecast more accurately when they know what products they have within their vicinities. So I think we need to start considering slightly differently the way FMD has been a cost so far, and we need to start looking at how we can turn this into a benefit. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. If we move straight on to Ettore.
Yeah, just a reality check. This is an expensive process. So if you think that you just finished, no, it just started. So as I say, I come from aerospace and automotive. The process started 20 years ago and is yet to finish. But the time was given, and the industry has been growing digital together with the regulation. What I see here is a little bit of the opposite. The regulator comes in a world where there is a lot of resistance to the change. So when you mentioned about 300 and whatever company register, are they fully compliant? Even the people registered on the MVO, meaning that all your lines, all your CMOs, all your CPOs, all your distributors are compliant. I don't think so. So this is a long process. I think the regulator have probably overlooked to the time span. I think something has to be reviewed. And okay, I'm happy in a sense that as a technology provider, solution provider, it's a big market. It's a lot of money. But I put myself in your shoes and say, how long this is going to take for me to get compliant, and how long is going to take for me also to get the further compliances down the road the next 20 years. This is a never ending. The regulator will change. The regulation itself will evolve. It's a simple thing. What are we authenticated now? The package. What is inside the package? Are we authenticated? No. So sooner or later they will come up. So I mean, I don't want to ruin your appetite. The lunch is lunch is around the corner. But again, I think we need to see this as a comprehensive investment. It's not a cost. It's an opportunity, as some of my colleagues say. But most of the companies see this as a cost, unfortunately. Moving to digital is no way back. And actually it's an opportunity because it's a first digital or data management part of your journey about your preventive quality, preventive maintenance, consumer behavior. You know, you control your supply chain. So it's not only a compliance. You can see that as one technology step about to control your supply chain in and out the door. But because of that, you need to brace it. In a sense, you need to look at a much bigger figure. What can I do with it? How much I'm gonna use this data? How big is my implementation? Because it's just not commission and decommissioning. This is the basics of the obligation. But I have the opportunity to have a long-term management of my data, consuming, where my products are going, how much of my products are sold. You know, this is something you need to see more beyond the brand protection too.
Thank you. The benefit of going last is that all the good analogies and all the good points have been made, so you have to think of some new ones. The one that I'm going to use is the Hubble telescope. If you remember when they launched the Hubble telescope, it took quite good pictures of the universe, but they're a bit fuzzy. The difference with serialization versus the batch that we have at the moment is 4 orders of magnitude of visibility in the supply chain. If you think of a batch as a few thousand packs, that's the level of visibility we have today in our supply chain. We can't tell within that number which one's which. With serialization, we laser right down to the pack. And that starts to be able to drive other things we can do in the supply chain, like linking that level of resolution to other parameters, like the temperature profile of that particular consignment. So you can have a temperature logger on the pallet, and you can associate the data with all of the data on that logger right down to the pack. So you're starting to get really fine-grained resolution on all sorts of other areas of risk in our big Venn diagram of supply chain risk in pharma that we don't have today, all because we put a few black dots on the box. So I think, as the other speakers have said, there's a whole bunch of painful change management stuff to do with serialization, and it really is a change management program with black dots involved. You know, it's much less to do with the mechanics of printing and vision systems and cloud software than it is to do with changing the behaviors of individual human beings when they see a box with that code on. And that's where the hard part comes. That's where the hard part comes in drug companies, where the hard part comes in pharmacies. If somebody on a production line in a manufacturer takes a pack off the line today and puts it back in the wrong order of the stream of packs, it doesn't matter because they're all going in a box at the end, they're all part of the same batch. If they do that in March and they put that pack back wrongly, it screws up all of the information downstream, particularly if that company is aggregating their data into shipper cartons and pallets, because suddenly there's a box that's in the wrong place. So we have to train everybody as well as putting new systems in, and that's not cheap. It needs to be done repeatedly. There's a whole host of things that we have to think about as an industry that we do differently after we start doing this properly. And I think we're just, as several people have said, we're at the beginning of this journey. This is definitely not something that's going to be finished in February with all the wishful thinking in the world. This is just the tip of a very long process. But I think the outcome is equally exciting. If you think of that 4 orders of magnitude gain for a start in visibility, I think we can start to think about how do we get more efficient. If I'm a pharmacy, how can I get more insight into what's my peak time of day for prescription pickup? What's my percentage of unpicked up prescriptions that I've bagged and made in advance. Is that different store by store? Are there some stores which are quite efficient, some stores which are not so good? How can I get best practice across my organization? We can start to harvest all of that information because we're collecting information pack by pack, and we're forcing people to think about the processes that they have in order to get ready for serialization that are by accident in some ways generating improvements in efficiency. So I think it's a bit optimistic to say this is a rosy dawn and it's all going to be fabulous next year, but I wouldn't take the pessimistic view that this is just a cost and we all just have to swallow it and get on with it. There is definite benefit there. Some of it may have to be dug out of the earth. It's not shiny diamonds laid on the top, but I think if we take the effort to do that, then we're improving patient safety fundamentally. This is all about eventually a global traceability system for drugs. That's the end game. The UK is relatively privileged, most of Europe's relatively privileged. Calling this the Falsified Medicines Directive arguably was a duff move. If we called it the Digital Medicines Directive, it would have been more accurate. You'd be pretty unlucky to go to Boots around the corner and get a fake medicine. If you go to a pharmacy in Africa, there was a study published very recently that said your chances of getting a fake antibiotic are 1 in 7. 14%. That's the end game, is protecting those lives by making the learnings that we've made here at relatively great expense cheaply available in markets where this is a life and death issue. So on that note, I'm going to throw the ball over to you again.
Thank you very much. Can I just get a round of applause for my excellent panellists? Great discussions around what FMD is. I really like how the story built up. So Jerome has essentially told us how the systems work. Are we ready? We pushed over to Peter, who said there's a digital artifact. Can we pull it across? We got a reality check from Ettore, which said, you know, this is an expensive process, but are we only doing it defensively or are we moving forward? And then we came to Mark and said, I love the Hubble telescope analogy. We get greater resolution in our supply chains, and how do we utilize this? So I'm going to open the floor to questions. Sure, can we go with you first? Sorry.
The question I've got, actually Mike touched on the Africa scenario there. Actually, I was going to ask, so in light of what serialization has been bringing and the challenges, I mean, I tracked when I was at Pfizer for many years, you know, the packs that we shipping out of Europe into the developing markets, and you see many of our packs being sold from multiples of whatever you pay with reference pricing based in Europe. I mean, Eric was talking about the whole challenge we've got around that in Europe and what's going on here in the UK. My question is that what do you see serialization doing in that space, and what does it ultimately mean for the intermediaries? You know, do you see disintermediation as part of that end game with this whole piece?
Yeah, I think there is an element of that, and of course, disintermediation is just a euphemism for putting people out of work. So that's where the resistance comes. In a lot of these countries, the people who are making money off drugs are the middlemen. It's not you as Pfizer, ex-Pfizer, it's the guys in the middle. So I think that's why we see pushback on some of these process changes to improve that. The weapon that will revolutionize this is the mobile phone, because if you have a cheap, easily printable code on a pack and you have a mobile phone that can read that code because it's not encrypted, yes, those codes can be faked, but it's hard to build an ecosystem of fakes. You can build fake packs, but it's hard to really penetrate the full ecosystem, and that's the philosophy behind the FMD, as you know, is to try to make it difficult for industrial fraud. It doesn't make it impossible to fake a single pack, but it makes it harder to build a business. And that's, I think, the future for Africa and the developing world, is giving them a technology that is perhaps a bit boiled down to what we do, but is still good enough and applicable enough that it saves lives. If you can take that number from 14% to 4%, that's probably hundreds of thousands of lives. We don't have to go for perfection. If anyone else wants to.
Well, it poses another problem about cybersecurity, though. In the sense, all this data accessible at any time from any place. You know, I think we're going to have a problem about how you assess the repository, you know, from the mobile phone. In the sense, you know, when you consider that billions of data available, who's going to take them the data management part of it going down the line. And one thing we need to consider is always, yes, I agree with you about is secure, but is the number of CMOs that are out of control. And I come from the reality of India, which is becoming the generic and over-the-counter and nutraceutical manufacturer of the world. 35% of the over-the-counter and generic in US are made in India. And this is all this supply chain part is actually unprotected. I mean, you can protect the manufacturing point, but when it goes out of the door, even if you have your aggregation bit, that's open a lot of space of counterfeit, a lot of space. Who's going to repack into a container on the shipping? You don't know. And I mean, for the big companies, I mean, this is that your supply chain is granted, but for everything which is more in the lower part of the pharmaceutical world, so the generic part and over the counter, this is not yet done. And my concern as user, I can buy a generic at the supermarket. Who grants me that? How can I access the authentication of it? I think that's the scenario we're going to see in the next few years. I mean, how are we going to protect also the digital sales, the online sales? Who's going to verify that the supplier, like the Amazon part of I can buy a lot of nutraceutical on Amazon, are those genuine? Even if I have the 2D code, can I have access to this data too? So as a technology provider, I'm very happy because it's the beginning of a journey. As far as the regulator, maybe the journey is not the February part. That's the concern. So, and then what you probably don't know, most of technology provider has now a standardization, let's say, group in way to try to harmonize the communication between different systems. Our system has its own protocol, their system has its own protocol. So there is an open SES committee, it was born like 2 years ago. We try ourselves to contribute to the cause without impacting the cost of it on the manufacturer. So we are bearing that investment in a way to try to give the possibility to use different technology and having this compatibility through the technology and also through the regulation. Because most of you are exposed not only to the European bit, but also to the FDA bit. And soon you're going to have the ANVISA bit. What's going to be China next? Or whatever is going to be the next regulation, because there is not one regulation. So GS1 is ruling the standard, but it's not ruling the content. So that's another problem that we need to face.
I think the question Naj asked was about disintermediation. And I think it was the chairman of Teva recently said that he doesn't see his competitors as being the traditional manufacturing companies. He sees them as being the Amazons and the Googles. And I suspect a lot of that is about how fleet of foot they are and how quickly they move. And they can start to innovate. And I'm not sure it's serialization at all. This is more about a market approach. And we're dealing with a company in Germany at the moment. They're a large organisation, a huge organisation. And 2 years ago, they changed their ethos. They said, we've got to think like a VC and act like a startup. And they're working in self-managing teams to allow themselves to fail and fail fast, or work to success more quickly. And I think I'm not from the pharmaceutical industry, but looking from the outside in, I think that's a very, very good lesson to learn, and necessary, actually, to be honest.
Okay, can we go for gentleman in the purple tie?
A couple of observations and then a couple of questions. Firstly, the missed opportunity I think we're going to have here. I understand that the swiping of the two-dimensional barcode on the pack isn't going to then link directly to a patient record. I mean, in Wales, for example, the sale database is totally comprehensive of everything there. And if only we could make that linkage, then it would be great. It's not so in England right now. But I guess, as you say, it's the start of a journey. Second point, that you mentioned Google and Amazon. This is a very good spur, I think, to the Amazonization of pharmaceutical pharmacy dispensing. My view is that, you know, within 5 to 10 years we shall see a demise of the classical high street dispensing. It's inefficient. It won't stop things that are expensive, because why would you keep that there? It demands people reading things and so on. Whereas people like Pharmacy 2U can do it much more at speed, and as the CEO says, it's 30% cheaper than Boots or Lloyd's, and no minister can stand back and see 30% of the drugs bill squandered that way. So this, I think, will accelerate that activity. 2 questions then. What percentage of pharmacies, premises, do you think will be up and running with these wiper devices on the 9th of February? Question number 1. Question number 2, gentleman said that we're only authenticating the external part of the pack, not the internal part of the pack. Will it be possible, do you think, for the patient to interrogate the product and link it to all sorts of other databases? The actual stuff that they're taking, not the pack.
Thank you. I'll let Jerome probably lead the first question, if that's okay.
The question about how many people are going to be ready and how many pharmacies are going to be ready by the 9th of February, they're all obliged to be ready by the 9th of February. In the same way that we as SecurMed are obliged to make the service available for them to use by the 9th of February. But as there's the analogy, you can take horses to water, but you can't make them drink. Yeah? We are providing the trough with the water in it. They've got to come and drink at that trough. They are all in different stages. And obviously, we know the external environment in the UK, in particular at the moment, we will mention it, Brexit, is having an impact. There are a lot of people looking at what should we do? Should we be ready for the 9th of February? Or should we wait and see what happens? So is everyone going to be ready by the 9th of February? I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
I can.
How many are going to be ready? I know that some large pharmacy chains are saying they are going to be ready. Some other chains are saying, well, we're not sure. So is there going to be 100% by the 9th of February?
No.
I think you've answered that question yourself. Yeah? And in terms of who's going to be ready, a large proportion of the supply chain is going to be ready. A large proportion, and certainly the UK, I was again looking this morning, which is the country that's most ready in terms of manufacturers and marketing authorization holders in Europe. It's the UK. The UK has the largest amount of onboarding of any with the European organisation of any country in Europe. The other countries are significantly smaller. The UK and Germany are primarily leading it, with France in third.
It's the only 2.
Yeah. It's primarily UK and Germany. Given that where we are with our own external environment, we're getting ourselves ready. And there's been a lot of work going on, certainly at the community pharmacy level. A lot of work's going on in the NHS. The NHS is going to take a lot longer. The NHS is going to take a lot longer because it's a much more slow-moving organisation. We know that the GPs in health centres are quite a small volume. They are going to take a lot longer. They haven't started. So are they all going to be ready by the 9th of February? No. What proportion of community pharmacists? I think quite a large proportion of community pharmacists are going to be ready, particularly from the larger multiples. But with the smaller, it's the message getting out to the smaller organisations, it's going to take a bit longer.
And the patient's role?
Sorry?
Patient's ability to interrogate?
At the moment in the UK, there is no intention to link up this database to patient data. And I think there was talk earlier about now, in Africa, I think in Nigeria, there is already the ability to scan a pack with a phone and to verify whether that medicine is the correct medicine. At the moment, the way that our medicines regulation works, particularly prescription-only medicines, is they are behind the counter in the pharmacy, and you have to have a prescription to acquire the medicine. So are you going to be able to check that against the system at this point in time? No.
But not just, I don't the outer pack, the actual product that's inside.
Well, I guess the question would be is how would you verify the authenticity of the product in the pack? Even the pharmacist and the wholesaler, they can't do that. They're supplied that, and our supply chain is very, very safe. So how do you verify it's safe? By the information, the labelling that's on the pack at the moment, and by the fact that we have our regulators who are verifying that. And look at online pharmacy. If you look at the online pharmacy, what has MHRA done to try and make sure that those online pharmacies are safe? There is the labelling scheme for online pharmacies in the UK, so you can verify that who's selling you you can verify that there are online pharmacies, that there is genuine pharmacy, that you're not being sold by someone by potentially as a counterfeiter. So it's those measures that give you the guarantee, not necessarily guarantee, but give you more certainty that who you're purchasing from is a reputable source. And it's about who's a genuine supplier of genuine medicines. And this is about, FMD is about, can you make sure that you're getting a genuine medicine? Well, if your supplier who's regulated is giving you a genuine medicine, then you should be sure, you should be certainly more sure of what's in the pack. Do you really need to do it yourself? I don't want to check the medicines in my pack. I don't know that not a lot of people would do.
Yeah, I think there's two answers to your question, Trevor. One is it possible? Yes, it's possible. There are technologies that are user-friendly. Banknotes are a good example where you can validate a banknote without any knowledge of what that feature is. Most drug companies have switched the budgets from those anti-counterfeiting technologies that they used to use into serialization. That's my observation.
I'm interested in the fact, forgive me, that the patient is so much part of, it's their life. If they could use that as a spur to get information and contact professionals, that's a real big advantage, rather than saying, I've got this magic potion, I've got to take one 3 times a day.
Absolutely, and I think that's coming. Sorry, Ettore. I think that's coming because when a patient can scan those codes, then in theory you can take them to a forum for other diabetics, or you can take them to the patient leaflet for that product they can have on their phone, and they can magnify it if they can't see very well, and all of the other benefits. I think that's coming. I don't see that as the spear point at this stage. It's really compliance driven.
However, to answer the question, there are technology to authenticate a single capsule, a single pill, if you like. It's just expensive. But as I've been living in this world for about 35 years, I see a lot of expensive stuff coming very cheap after 10, 15 years. So we might expect those technology to be available in a way to authenticate a single pill or a single numbers. So you can combine the footprint or the fingerprint of each single pill to the serialization number. That's technically possible. I'm not skeptical, or I'm actually optimistic, because I'm part of the technology, the provider and technology developer, so I can see that coming. Point is just the cost.
I think fundamentally we have an obligation to secure the supply chain so that individuals don't have to check.
Yes.
You don't get on a train or a plane and worry about the bolts being tightened on the wing. And that should be the stage that we get to, I think, with our own industry, is that it's built in.
Is that answers your question? May I? Okay, thank you. So I'm Viraj from GSK. So my background is also generic, also innovator pharma. And I've lived in Germany, UK, India, and I also done a lot of research on counterfeit medicine. So that's why I was quite interested into this session here. Basically, my profession is procurement, so little bit mismatch for this forum here. But I have to disagree to several things here based on my knowledge and experience in past, that this falsified medicine directive do serve a purpose a lot, because I think we have been focusing in this session a lot on the serialization of the drug product which is being dispensed. But I think we need to be mindful that the whole directive has a lot of, in minuses from zero actually. So from where it all starts. So it has also laid down some of the more responsibilities on the marketing authorization holders. And this could actually reply to some of the gentleman's question that how do we ensure that the drug product is not counterfeit, what I'm being dispensed? Because pharma industry has larger role to play now. So what I really like to understand is from where it all starts, according to you. So are we starting this implementation of FMD from the point of the dispensing or the point of the dispense from the factory, so X works, or how it's going backward actually? And what are your views into that? So are we starting from the drug ingredient manufacturer itself?
We should.
And we are doing, and
You're
I
doing
think
it,
this is what the beauty is of everything. So this is just the part of the dispensing. And so what are your views? So how are we ready as a system to promote our drug product manufacturer to leverage the market, especially India, China, from where the ingredients comes from, so that they are compliant, and then we are sure that we have the right thing here. So what are your views on that?
Well, the only obligation comes from you. There is not a regulation to impose the formulation provider or the chemistry provider to have the authentication of their product. Not yet. So the only obligation coming on the supply chain comes from you as a manufacturer, as a producer of the product. The technology is there, but the point is it's expensive. Who's going to pay for it? It's the same question that we've been asking to the regulator. I'm dealing with the government of India now, right? And on a daily India, yeah, because now they want to reinforce their export. So they had the GFT, the CGI also for domestic. And it's an expensive process, nobody wants to pay. So, and the only, let's say, contributor to this is the manufacturer. So everything is on your shoulder. I don't envy you guys. I'm the technology, we are technology provider, we are happy. We are the happy part of the process because we get your money. Don't get me wrong. But at the end, we are also sharing your pain because whenever, there is one, as an example, the moment you put your technology for the solution is the moment your productivity drops. You know that. And the more you go up to the manufacturing process, the more or the worse we get, because you're going to filter the process through the very beginning, and so whatever is not compliant has to stop there. But it's expensive. How many of the company or your let's say contractor, provider, vendors will be capable to sustain it?
I think that's a very good point, and I think that's the question for the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think it's a problem for the whole world, so has to be answered by everybody. But you have very fair observation basically here,
So
that at the end it's a cost and the productivity.
yeah, it's a cost of productivity immediately. As you implement the serialization technology, your productivity 5 to 10% drops. And then you start to realize, oh, my printer is not good quality, my cartoning machine is not. So I need to change my printers, I need to change my, it's only the correlated cost around the serialization, which is not only the solution, it's everything. From your blistering machine down to your cartoning machine to your shipper, so your shrink wrappers is not good anymore, and then you go down to your labeler on your pallet, and you still realize that you need to change that one as well. So probably the cost of compliance goes beyond as a technology provider. Now, if you go upstream, it's going to get worse. When you go up to your, formulation area, your mixer, then you come down your encapsulation or your tableting machine, any variation of your humidity might compromise it. It's a lot of things that if the regulator gives the time, it's 20 years like the others have been doing, and it's good. I mean, you can just step one at a time, and then you can see your supply chain adopting it slowly. But it has to come from you. We cannot enforce it. I can just make proposal. We can make proposal. We can work together. Around this, not only us as a technology provider, to come up to the simplest way and the cheapest ways possible to help you. But at the end of the day, you are the one paying. I'm sorry to say that. It's the manufacturer. I don't think the distributor would want to pay one single penny. Not even the machine maker wants to save it.
Can I maybe answer that slightly obliquely? We're working on a project in Thailand for medicinal marijuana. And it starts with the harvesting of the product with the hill farmers, who are a grossly impoverished community. And the reasons they want to do this is to regulate the quality of the product from harvesting right the way through to consumption, so upstream. But they also want to use smart contracts with the blockchain to allow automated payments to the farmers, and automatic tax deduction. And that's where they make their money. This is what funds the project, because at the moment they don't trust their tax collectors. So they're able to deduct at source the tax that's due on those products before it goes into the manufacturing facility and then downstream into distribution. So there are, if you squint, there are ways you can see how this can be cost justifiable as well.
Thank you very much. And maybe just the last question, when you say the 7 to 10% increase in cost, So is this the kind of the estimated figure you have seen from other industry who has already serialization in place?
No, the other institute was slightly more expensive. So the aerospace was far more complex. Look at the numbers of components in an engine of an airplane. It was about 20,000. Each one of those components is 2D coded. But this is, again, it's been growing together with the digital world in the last 20 years. So the obligation came end to hand with the technology. So it was not really an obligation. It was a benefit also from the manufacturer to see their brand protected, their safety, because it's easy to be disqualified out of a supply chain, like for example Rolls-Royce in UK or General Electric, two largest producer of engine for an airplane. It's if you don't comply now, you cannot fly. It's going to happen to you. If you don't comply, you cannot sell. But the regulator, I think, has been a little too harsh. It's black and white. That's my point. I think I'm not against it. Again, I'm not against regulation. On the contrary, you have to have a regulation. As I'm a consumer, I'm a potential patient, and I've been patient a few times. I want to be protected like everyone else. At the end, however, should have been done gradually. It should be also. I don't know how many of the manufacturers were involved in the discussion about regulation. I don't think any. Any of you were somehow around the table with the regulator. I mean, it's happening, for what I know, it's happening in another country like China or in India. I see a lot of GSK was there the last time I was in Delhi. There is a contribution. The regulator has to make a decision at the end of the day. But if the regulator sees the bigger picture, and you say, okay, you can do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Even FDA has been doing phase 1, phase 2, 5 years, 2018, 2023. It's still not enough. How many in FDA are compliant? The same, less than 20%.
Well, I think
Thank you.
in terms of the FMD legislation, that's been coming a long time. It's been going, as I understand, since 2010. We're now end of 2018. So 8 years in. And what it's actually doing is, are we trying to identify every falsified medicine in the supply chain? No. We're trying to identify where in the supply chain falsified medicines may be being inserted, such that the regulators can take the necessary action to stop them.
Maybe we can
That's
just
what-
stop them entering our supply chain. That's it. They
Well,
will
as
never
manufacturers,
stop.
you already have the regulation in your supply chain to make sure what you're supplying in the market is authentic medicine. So manufacturers and marketing authorization, there's enough controls there to say that that supply should be safe. It's further down the supply chain from once you start selling them. That's where the challenge comes in, and that's where FMD is adding the extra level of check and fail-safe that the medicines are safe as they go through the supply chain through to the point of dispense to patients.
I think there's another process risk here as well, which is not often discussed, which is that if governments and large manufacturers who subcontract manufacturing drive behaviours on the basis of cost, so they seek the lowest cost option, then even if serialization is required, those packs may be printed with the lowest quality data matrix code, and eventually, 6 months later when they hit the pharmacist scans it, nothing happens. So we're going to have a lot of packs which are substandard when they hit pharmacies, and those companies are going to have to go back to some of my esteemed colleagues in the room to get some real machinery that does the job properly. So I think there's a few things that are going to happen next year that'd be quite interesting to see who's been skimping and who's been investing properly.
Absolutely.
There have been some examples of that already. So, in certainly some of the other countries where they've been doing some testing, they have found some of the 2D matrices already, the quality isn't quite good enough. So that's already a teething problem.
But in principle, we are subject to grade the quality of the print, A, B, C, D, E, F, S. But I see a lot of customers just say, well, my productivity is not there. I don't care, I put it back into. And I say, well, I don't want to be part of it. Okay? So if you want to put your rejects back into it, I just put a waiver in there. I've done my problem.
Can I ask the question? I just wanted to add some figures on color here, because I think my question was who's paying for this, but you've addressed that, Ettore. The USDS CSA last year, Mercelsbergen, McKesson, and Cardinal did a study. 6.7% of the products that they handled in North America are compliant. I think they redid this study this year, and something like 21%. We still haven't hit the milestone yet. I mean, November's the deadline, right, for US. Just wanted to add some figures in terms of, I mean, Bart will say that his print's the best and it will give you the best quality and the best results. I'm not sure if we addressed Trevor's question with regards to patient integration, but I also believe that we missed a trick not going to the unit level with regards to serialization, track and trace. But I just wanted to put some other figures out there on online pharmacies. So there's a form of activities done on a European level commission on the sale of counterfeit goods, and 62% of medicines purchased online are fake or substandard. Yeah, this was at ISPE in Rome earlier this year, and the figures I'm quoting are from a slide deck presented by Medicines for Europe. 95.6% of online pharmacies researched were operating illegally, and then 90% of websites supplying prescription-only medicines were supplying medicine without prescriptions. So I just wanted to get the panel's thought on how FMD will help in those instances. And I also take on point the board, you know, the disruptors are coming from the retail sector. You've got Amazon buying PillPack, which is disruptive in one way. I think also when you look at lessons learned and transparency on supply chains, you know, we've got a lot to learn from people like Unilever, etc., who are being open book policy, if you like, in terms of who's contributing to their supply chain and to their products. So I just thought, with the figures that I've mentioned, what your thoughts are in terms of the panel.
Due to the time constraints, if I can limit it to 30 seconds per panelist running across. So Mark, if you shoot us off.
Yeah, I'll do the quick one. FMD won't help. In theory, it will help because there's a logo, which I'm sure any Eastern European hacker could probably make a fairly good copy of, quite straightforwardly. It won't really help the supply through website pharmacies, and that's an issue that we have to do in other ways. I think we have to address the educational side, tell people to be careful. We have to do much more background checks on these people, and we have to close them down. We have to get Visa and MasterCard involved, all of those kind of remedies.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I know online pharmacy is here to stay. In the UK, our regulators have taken action to make sure that those pharmacies that are issuing prescription medicines have a method by which you can see, you can verify they're authentic. But we can't stop the patient from going and buying it from a website that looks like one that's authentic. Now what we're doing, what we need to do as part of FMD, as a part of our requirement under the regulation, is to make sure that we verify all of those locations that are registering with us to verify dispensed medicines against the records that are official within the country. That is, a bit, like I said earlier, we can bring people to the table and give them the information, allow them to bring the relevant people to be compliant, but you're not going to get all of them. And there's a certain amount of additional education required to those who are patients to make sure you understand when you're buying online the risks of what you're doing, in particular when it deals with prescription medicines.
We're members of ASOP, working with Mike Isles and his team to try and address this, because it's a huge problem. And I think the challenge goes back to one option could be that you expose the serial number of the product when you buy it online. The challenge with that, though, is it doesn't scale terribly effectively. And somebody already made the comment that you can buy products 30% cheaper online. That delta would quickly erode if you had to have the serial number of the product you want to be dispatched exposed on the website every time. And it's a challenge that we are trying to help address.
Well, it's the same. Everything you can buy online can be fake. So it's a bigger issue here. It's much bigger issue. From electronics to consumer to cosmetic, now also the pharma products. So it has to go back to the regulator. How you're going to filter the product going online has to come from the regulator itself, because where is the source of this product has to be the one who's going to be somehow under the scrutiny before they go and selling it online. I agree with you, it's the largest part of the fake is going into online. So, technology-wise, we can do a lot of things, but nothing. At the end, if the product is fake, the product is fake.
So we are out of time, I believe. Yes, I got nods in the back. So we're out of time, I believe. So I just want a really huge round of applause for our panelists. I think they've brought a lot of insight and a lot of discussions, actually. We're probably leaving with more questions than answers, which is a great way to leave the hall. So I guess please do connect with our panelists. And I want to thank you all for some great questions and being a good audience. So thank you very much.